What's up, guys? I hope you guys are having an awesome day. Now, I'm already seeing a lot of people knocking down UFC 256, and I want to talk about how great this card is and talk about each individual big fight that I'm very much excited for. Firstly, on the prelims, we have Billy Cortillo versus Gavin Tucker. That's a fun grappling match with two guys who are developing their striking. Good prospects of the featherweight division. It's insane how many great grapplers we have in the featherweight division. Billy Cortillo specifically is a guy to really look out for in the future. We also have Cub Swanson returning to fight Daniel Pineda, which is quite an interesting fight. I'm always looking forward to see how Swanson competes. He always puts on a show, man. If someone is able to bring that same kind of intensity to him, he's always able to match it, and it makes for an absolute war. And then we have the big one, no pun intended, Julio Santos versus Cyril Gane. This is a fight a lot of people are looking forward to because Cyril Gane is one of the most promising prospects to ever fight in the heavyweight division, and he's finally going to be tested for real against a veteran, a former champion. Even though he's over the hill, he's still a big step up in competition for the young kickboxer. That's a highly anticipated fight. Then we have Marvin Vettori going to be fighting Jacare Souza. This is a better fight than what they originally had for him. Marvin Vettori was originally supposed to fight Omari Akhmedov. Akhmedov had to pull out, so Jacare stepped in, coming back down to the middleweight division. That's a super interesting fight, man. Marvin Vettori is a promising fighter of the middleweight division. He's currently on a 3-fight win streak. He looked amazing against Carl Robertson, showing his grappling skills, and he almost defeated Israel Adesanya. He went to a split decision with Adesanya, and a lot of people still to this day put up an argument that he beat him. There's definitely a little bit of a rivalry or a little bit of excitement around Marvin Vettori whenever he competes. And then, of course, most likely the best fight of the card, one of the best fights of the entire year. When you're looking for action, when you're looking for constant volume and a back and forth element, crazy grappling, crazy scrambling, long range strikes, looking to hurt the opponent with everything they do, putting on a terrifying pace, Tony Ferguson versus Charles Oliveira. This is the absolute best fight they could put on for the lightweight division, in my opinion. When you talk about skills, competitiveness, everything that comes together in a fight, Tony Ferguson versus Charles Oliveira is an absolute demented fight. Right now, I'm starting to get hyped up for that fight, even though it's a little time away. And then, of course, we have the unprecedented return from Deiveson Figueiredo, who just fought 2 days ago. He's going to make the quickest turnaround in UFC championship history 3 weeks after a fight. No champion has ever done that in the UFC. And not only that, he just headlined his first pay-per-view. Now he's headlining his second pay-per-view 3 weeks later against the most deserving contender of that division, the guy he deserved to fight 2 days ago, Moreno. Very respected contender of the division, very respectable skills, great grappling to rival a little bit of Figueiredo's submissions, his dominant positional work, slick transitions, and all that stuff, man. Those are some of the big fights, and the card is not even done yet. We still have more fights to go. This alone is enough for me to buy the card. If Deiveson Figueiredo and Tony Ferguson are on a card, I'm buying it. Like, I don't care who else is on it. I will buy it just for those two if they're on the card. That's enough for me to get my money's worth. And now, can you imagine, there's people already knocking down this card. They're saying it's not worth a pay-per-view. They're saying it's not even that good of a card. Now, there's like 2 reasons I can understand why people say this, but I absolutely do not agree with either reason. Number 1, we already lost 3 title fights on it. We lost Kamaru Usman versus Gilbert Burns. We lost Amanda Nunes versus Megan Anderson. We just lost Petr Yan versus Aljamain Sterling. What does Sterling have to do to get a title shot, man? Even if he's granted a title shot, something out of his control happens to take that shot away from him, and he has to again wait for it. So the constant changing of the card might be the main reason why a lot of people don't look at this card the same. This has happened before, of course, but we have some amazing fights when you look at the card objectively. The other reason has to be the flyweight stigma. People just don't like flyweights. No matter how exciting they actually are, people just do not like flyweights because they're part of the flyweight division. Once they move up to bantamweight, now they like them. It's very weird when you really think about it. But the fact that Deiveson Figueiredo versus Moreno is most likely going to headline the card, I think that's another big reason why people don't like it. But frankly, I'm enjoying the flyweight division. I think they're putting on some of the best fights in the UFC. I think they have the most exciting champion on the roster, and they're some of the most skilled fighters across the board with a lot of finishes as of late. But let's look into it a little bit deeper. So Julio Santos versus Cyril Gane. How do I think this fight is going to go, and who do I think is going to win? I am going to make my official prediction after doing a little bit more of a breakdown of the fighters. First, you have to note, Julio Santos is more so of a boxer. He moves around the cage a bit, but he likes to do his work in the center. Cyril Gane is a kickboxer, way better kicks of course, and much better movement, right? He's one of the only heavyweights who can outmaneuver JDS without even pressuring him. His angular work is outstanding, but more impressive is his linear movements. When he goes forward and back, it's hard to track him. He's always ready to backstep for counter shots, And because of his feints, he always tends to get the opponent to back up. Very few fighters in the UFC who use this constant linear movement are able to back up opponents. Usually it's them backing up or sits in the center. Due to Gane's feinting, and whenever he shows his hands to his opponent, they all just start backing up away from him. It's almost like they see something that we are not seeing. There are fighters that are very different to stand in front of than what you see from the outside. Your understanding of that fighter greatly differs once you're standing in front of them. And I think Cyril Gane's one of those guys, and I think it's due to his speed. I think he seems much faster in front of his opponent than he does when we're looking from the outside. And he looks very fast when we're watching his fights. It almost looks like he's moving around like a welterweight while having heavyweight power. That is a huge problem for JDS. If JDS is backing up to Cyril Gane, who has that kind of movement and that kind of footwork, Gane is not going to allow him to get away from the cage. And that is where JDS always finds the biggest issues in a fight. He doesn't counter back that much. He's way more open for shots. The leg kicks are also going to be a huge weapon for Gane to disrupt the movement, which is something a lot of people don't throw at JDS at all. Francis Ngannou landed a few big leg kicks, but nobody's going to be able to use it with movement to get away from JDS's kicks like Cyril Gane will, right? Francis Ngannou was getting leg kicked after he hit JDS with some. Gane is not going to be in that area after throwing his own kicks. He's way too fast on his feet for a backed up JDS to throw kicks at him. And if that does happen, Gane is going to be right back in his face. Remember that linear movement, back and then forward. Back on the kick rotates around, causes JDS to overextend. Gane moves forward right in his face and counters him. I can absolutely see that happening. JDS will try to scale the cage to get away from Gane, being very defenseless like usual, and it gets caught by a big hook or something like that. I absolutely do see Gane winning this fight, and I think he's going to win by a second round TKO, maybe even third round. He's a very patient fighter, so I don't see him looking for the knockout necessarily, which is usually the way fighters get knockouts, when they're not looking for it. Marvin Vettori versus Jacare Souza. This is interesting because Marvin Vettori is a more well-rounded fighter, and the age factor is going to be very impactful in this fight. Jacare's old. He's 40 years old, taking a lot of damage in his career. He's coming off a 2-loss streak, even though he barely lost to Jan Blachowicz in his last fight. That was in the light heavyweight division. He isn't looking necessarily the same ever since that Chris Weidman fight, which he did get tagged a bit in that one. Jack Hermanson was able to put it on him in combinations, as well as doing very well on the ground with him, and Jan Blachowicz kind of just pressured his way to a victory. But here's the thing, man. If Jacare is able to take down Marvin Vettori, which is a difficult task, Jacare should have an advantage to win this fight. I don't think he's going to necessarily submit Marvin Vettori right away. I don't think he's going to be as dominant on the ground as people think. Vettori is a younger guy, and he has a respectable ground game himself. We saw Jack Hermanson was able to hang with Jacare on the ground, and I do not discredit Marvin Vettori's ability as well. If it stays on the feet, I think Marvin Vettori is going to most likely win this fight due to the pressure, due to the kicks specifically, and getting away from that big, one-dimensional right hand that Jacare always looks to go for. He throws the big overhand right and a left hook to the body. Those are generally his biggest weapons. Sometimes he'll throw right high kicks, sometimes he'll throw right low kicks, but he's a bit slower than Vettori, and you would have to think at this day, people are going to be able to see his striking from miles away after studying him for so long. So I do think Marvin Vettori is going to win this fight through a decision. And then we go to Tony Ferguson versus Charles Oliveira, which should be a 5-round fight, but it's probably going to be 3 rounds. I hope Dana changes that up for this fight specifically, because we're not going to see the final product of Ferguson versus Oliveira unless it's a 5-round fight. Unless one of them gets finished, no matter what happens in there, it's not going to seem like a satisfying victory for one or the other. But ultimately, I did talk about this fight. I do think Tony Ferguson is going to win. I think he's a little bit too long. I think his volume is a little bit too much. I don't think Oliveira is equipped to go to war or trade shots with Ferguson. He's more of a sniper. He has very good counter shots. He can mimic what Justin Gaethje did to Ferguson, of course. He has pretty good movement. He's pretty athletic, able to backstep into right overhand counters, left hooks, stuff like that. He has very good kicks as well. The light kicks are going to be a bit disruptive, and his best chance of victory is of course to pressure Ferguson, which is extremely hard to do. Very few fighters are able to pressure Ferguson unless it's part of Ferguson's plan to take like the first round off, as he did against RDA and Kevin Lee. In a 3-round fight, he's going to have less time to be patient. He needs to go after Oliveira a bit more and try to break him down. He does not want to get pressured at all in this fight. Oliveira is also a long-range striker, but ultimately I do see Ferguson technically out-brawling Oliveira, landing elbows, discouraging him as the fight goes on. He's much tougher and has a better chin, but generally I just see Ferguson being able to break Oliveira down. Through pressure, through volume, and through power. Just putting it on him just like he does everybody else. Whenever you see Oliveira lose in his fights, it tends to be because opponents are able to overpressure him and he starts to wilt under it. In the striking or even in the grappling. Even guys like Paul Felder, who got on top of Oliveira on the ground, was withering him away with his pressure and his ground and pound. And even in the third round with Kevin Lee, when Lee started to pressure Oliveira heavily, you saw Oliveira was not able to land his strikes as sharply, and he was greatly miscalculating the range. And that is ultimately what I do see from Ferguson. So I see Ferguson winning through a decision win. I think he's gonna win every single round. First round might be a little bit dicey. I see a 10-8 for him in the third. And then the main event, Deiveson Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno. I'm probably going to stop calling him Figgy, because I never really liked that name. It's just what everybody calls him. Unless that's universally what we're going to be calling Figueiredo, because he has an extremely long name. It becomes a mouthful to say all the time. I see Deiveson winning this fight. I think his power is too much. He's a better striker overall. Moreno likes to brawl, and he likes to stay out of range. He gets very sloppy on the feet. He starts extending with these giant looping punches, as well as ducking his head all over the place. Brawling with Figueiredo is almost like what Chill Sonny used to say. It's the same as the reason they put warnings on packs of cigarettes. Brawling with Figueiredo may be hazardous to one's health. Even if you're able to land more than him in those exchanges, it's like his bones are made out of adamantium. He will eat all your punches just to land one of his because he knows one is enough to knock out anybody. That's all he needs to do, land one shot behind the ear, grazing, full on square on the jaw. One shot from Figueiredo in those brawling exchanges will knock out Moreno, or drop him at least. And the fact that Moreno is always leaning and moving his head in dramatic fashion, ducking all over the place, Figueiredo might catch him with an uppercut, he might catch him with a knee, he might catch him behind the ear with a hook. I think he's going to do a lot of body work on Moreno as well. Moreno doesn't generally move his feet as much as he moves his head. He ducks and leans all over the place without moving his feet much, and there's a lot of body shots opportunities for Figueiredo to go for. Leg strikes as well. Figueiredo is going to welcome the ground game 100%. I honestly think he is comfortable going on the ground with anybody in this division. I don't think there's one person in this division that he's worried about going on the ground with. And Moreno is definitely a scrambling Tasmanian devil, but I don't think it's going to bother Figueiredo at all. I think he's going to be able to control Moreno. He's much bigger than him as well. He's very heavy for this division. If he gets on top of Moreno, takes him to the ground, because people do underrate his trips. Those wild exchanges on the feet might tend to fall into a clinch. Figueiredo trips him to the ground, gets on top of him, lands some ground and pound shots, passes the guard, gets a guillotine, maybe a mounted triangle, something like that. That's definitely a huge possibility. I don't see where Moreno is going to really cause a lot of danger for Figueiredo. I think he's going to hang in there for many areas of the fight. Standing, he's going to be able to brawl his way into getting a little bit of success. And on the ground, there's going to be moments where he's able to scramble with Figueiredo, not getting the better of it, but showing he's a bit competitive with him. But ultimately, the end product of it all is going to be Figueiredo getting on top of him and winning the final parts of those exchanges. Ultimately, I see Figueiredo winning by a second or even third round submission. I do see him dropping Moreno once or twice in the fight due to straight punches beating looping punches. So man, UFC 256 is an absolute insane card. If anybody's knocking this card, just show them this video or something. Just show them what fights are on this card and why. Guys like Figueiredo, guys like Moreno, guys like Ferguson, Oliveira, Vettori, Jacare, JDS, Gane, Cub Swanson, Billy Quarantillo, why all these guys are definitely worth watching. It's not even a weak pay-per-view, right? People want to say, you know, it's probably not a bad card, but it's definitely not worthy of a pay-per-view. I 100% disagree. Ferguson is essentially going to be the co-main event. If Ferguson's a co-main event to anybody, you know that card is stacked. And people will say, yeah, but he probably should headline over Figueiredo given his name and stuff like that, but Figueiredo's a monster. Everybody should be a fan of this guy. He has everything you want in a fighter, everything you're excited about in a fighter. He knocks people off with one punch. He has a savage mentality in the cage. He has submissions for days, man. Super lethal on the ground. He always goes for the finish. He doesn't objectively fall into the stigma of quote-unquote boring flyweight. Doesn't go for the finish, all that stuff. That's not what he is. In fact, no flyweight champion was ever like that. But he is definitely one of the most exciting fighters on the entire roster for sure. And I'll argue with anybody about that. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to thumbs up. If you enjoyed my content, make sure to subscribe. My next video is going to be the live podcast. I'm going to do that tomorrow. I fixed the audio issues that I had before from my first live podcast. Of course, the first one is going to have a few issues. And I'm going to make it a little bit more organized with the questions. You know, you can, of course, always ask live questions. But this time, I'm going to read them after the community tab questions just to keep it all in order, you know? Before, I was kind of like switching questions in the middle of it. And it got a little bit unorganized for my liking. I didn't feel good about that. So the podcast is going to go live tomorrow from 2 p.m. Eastern time to 4 p.m. Eastern time. Somewhere around there, I'm going to start. So if you guys missed the first podcast, I'm excited to see you guys in the second.